it's a positive film. It has heroes and villains, and that it essentially is a fun movie to watch. It's been a long time since people have been able to go to the movies and see a sort of straightforward, wholesome, fun adventure.
Well, it's a fantasy. It's not science fiction so much as it is space fantasy. And it's about people. It's finally about people and not finally about science.
The story, when you actually put it into words, is only so much nonsense to hang a great visual experience onto. It's the stuff that fairy tales are made of.
Sort of boiling down religion into a very basic concept. The fact that there is some deity or some power or some force that sort of controls our destiny works for good and also works for evil.
Marvelous, healthy innocence. Great pace, wonderful to look at, full of guts, nothing unpleasant. I mean, people go bang bang and people fall over and are dead, but, no horrors. A sort of wonderful freshness about it, kind of like a wonderful fresh air.
It's got whatever you want it to be. It's pure entertainment. It's like a roller coaster ride, and it can be interpreted as long as you enjoy it, which is the intention.
I'm delighted to welcome onto Generation Skywalker. Well, I'm going to say it. Most people in vintage collecting won't know his name. I'm with Ross Barr. Good evening, Ross.
Hey, Stuart. How you doing, bud? How's it going?
I'm all good, mate. Thank you ever so much for coming on and chatting about your collection, because it is impressive. At this current time, we are in isolation, and you did a fantastic video of your collecting space and your collection, which was wonderful to see. I think that was over on the 12 back group, wasn't it?
It sure was, man. That feels like a million years ago. It was about 6.5 weeks ago. How long this time has gone when we've been in lockdown mode.
We were only talking about this on our last show, how you're quite fortunate. You have bigger properties than what we generally do over here, and your collection space is incredible. An amazing space, and you have decorated that incredible, haven't you? Let's just talk about your collection room for a minute. The ceiling's got every card back on it.
Yeah, so I'm a Han Solo focus collector. So the door to the collection room it's painted in the style of Han Solo and Carbonite, which is pretty neat. The painters, the artists that I commissioned to do it, they gave it kind of a 3D look. So even though it's painted and it's 2D, gives you the impression that the hands, as he's kind of holding his hands out in horror as he got frozen in Carbonite, or in a 3D kind of coming at you. So that's the entryway to the door. And on the ceiling, as you mentioned, are each of the Han Solo variation card fronts, offerless, stickerless, so each of the variations: Han Original, Han Hoth, Bespin, Trenchcoat, and Carbonite, in a large size. And then on the back, all the backs kind of floating around those 5 images in a row in a much smaller size are each of the card back variations throughout the line. Now, I didn't do, for example, 12A, 12B, 12C, all basically look the same. So if a card back looked the same, I didn't repeat it 3 times. Obviously, there's only so much room you have on your ceiling, and I just wanted everything to look different. So I think there's 30 maybe 30 to close to 40 card backs that look different. Again, a 41B and a 41C looks the same. I believe 41C or D. Oh, I'm screwing that up, but you get the point. Yeah. So yeah, it's neat. So I was originally going to have that painted, but there's so much detail to that, to all the card backs and fronts, and it would have looked, not the best quality to have someone paint that, and it probably would have cost me a fortune to paint all that. So all those, I got very high resolution images and printed them to canvas, almost like wallpaper, and then had them pasted to the ceiling and some airbrushing around them to make look like there was a 3D effect to it. And then that's the ceiling, and each of the 3 main walls had, and I think we'll talk about this in a little bit, but had the borders of the walls drawn in like it was the border of a vintage card, a Star Wars, an Empire Strikes Back, and a Return of the Jedi. Not what would be in the center of the image. No card back images, no bubbles or anything like that. Just the border, that racetrack, and at the very top, the different logo, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, and the obviously with the Star Wars one, there's a Hildebrandt logo on the top right as well.
It is fantastic. It looks so clean and crisp. Anyone
Thanks.
who hasn't seen it really should go and see it, because even your loose collection you have got as the back of a card, haven't you? You've done it.
Yeah. There's a gentleman named Matt Volpato, who created these displays that mimic the back of different carded figures. So for my full run in '92, it's that yellow background with at the very bottom, the number with each of the characters' name, and then rows across that you could put the figures where they sat in the multiple rows on that yellow card back. Just iconic, a great way to put your loose collection. And he does a great job.
Yeah, brilliant. It does look fantastic. Absolutely love it.
Thanks, man.
I'm not sure. I haven't checked this recently, but you used to be an admin across the timeline groups. Is that still the case?
It's not. It's not. I was originally an admin for, as you said, that what people call the timeline group, 12 back, which was Star Wars early vintage, then the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And just about 3 years ago, I joined Collector Archive Services as an owner. I invested in that company, which had just been around a few months at the time. And so I knew that was going to become more of a time commitment. So at the time I dropped out of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and did stay in the 12 back group, because that was, the first group that I started and were a part of, and is kind of my home. Everyone has their little home, their favorite place on Facebook when it comes to collecting groups, even though there's 7,000 Star Wars collecting Facebook groups, right? Everyone has that one that's kind of their home. So that's my home. And so I wanted to remain there, and I've remained there. Now, unfortunately, over the last few years, I just, because of time and constraints and family and CAS obligations, I probably am not as active as I used to be in adminning, but I give when I can. And luckily there's some other really, really great guys that run that group and keep it going.
I think out of all the Facebook groups, I always think the 12 back group is probably the best place for an education or learning stuff, because, like I say, some of the bigger collectors are in there, aren't they, who have got that experience. And I always find it a bit more.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's certainly got better once I stepped down a little bit. So
yeah, well, you said it. No, now you just alluded to it there. You're part of the CAS group, one of the owners. You do grading there and preservation.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that really attracted me to the company when they first came out, because they debuted, soft debut in October of 2016, and when the company started, they started out close to where I live, and they came out at the time. There was other companies that were still doing U grading and pulling figures off of cards to put into a case, and CAS came out of the box and said that they wouldn't do that, and brought a preservation angle, and it was more about the aesthetics and display and properly preserving these iconic pieces of history, as opposed to just chasing grades. Obviously, we provide a grade, and the grading in that third-party objective view is an important part of what we do, but really put the focus more on the piece, more on preservation, more on display, more on documentation. And that was attractive to me. And I've kind of carried that forward as the focus of what we do and how we try to make an impact on the hobby.
Yeah, I think you do it for the right reasons, not just for a quick buck, I think, as some of the other grading companies. Although both yourself and AFA, big hats off to you with what you've done during the lockdown for the hospitals. I don't know what they're called. What are they?
Yeah, it's an intubation shield. So essentially, as the frontline workers battle COVID-19, the sickest patients have often needed to be intubated, which means that they stick a tube down their throat in order to then put them on a ventilator to help them breathe. Now, if you can imagine, when someone's intubating, when a doctor or nurse or other health frontline worker is intubating someone, you're literally, imagine the patient's laying down, that healthcare professional's face is literally over top that other the patient's face. It's as close as you're ever going to be, and probably the highest risk of infection. And so there was a bunch of companies that had done this, and we saw it. They were making these acrylic shields, were essentially created a barrier between the patient's face, but obviously the beauty of acrylic, not only for toys, but for something like this, is it's see-through and not obstructive when it comes to viewing what's below the acrylic. And so it created a shield, a barrier that would allow, with some holes in the box, that would allow the person to still intubate, but have a complete shield from their face to the patient's face. Over the last several weeks, we've been producing, dozens and dozens and dozens. I think we're over 200 of these shields at no cost to the hospitals. As I've described it to some of my partners at CAS and other people I've talked to, it was always very rewarding to me that I've had through CAS, and CAS itself has had a profound impact on a lot of collectors' collections, and we've helped people create interesting custom pieces, and it really gives me purpose and meaning that we've had such an impact on people's lives through collecting. But never in a million years did I imagine that we would have an opportunity to join the fight and protect people that are literally risking their lives every single day to save other people. And again, what we did isn't more important than what the healthcare workers are doing, but we certainly had a hand in that. And it's by far the most rewarding and unexpected thing that that ever could come out of making acrylic cases for people's little dollies. So it's just been a great experience, and we're just so honored to be part of it.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant and so selfless that, as I say, you knocked out over 200. That's good going. It's brilliant. Just one other thing before we move off from CAS. You say you'll design any kind of box really to display people's items. I've seen all sorts of stuff. I've seen someone recently with all the, I'm trying to think of something like the wax packets for tops all in a row in an acrylic case. I've seen unused ships with all the sticker sheets boxed up into them, up down to little things. You literally will turn your hand to anything and produce anything the customer wants, won't you?
Yeah, I mean that's we want to be the yes company, absolutely. There's other companies that if something's not complete or it's not something that they typically will grade or it's too complex, it was hard to find a place to do it. For us, it's fun, and we don't ever want to tell a collector no, and all those creative, interesting things that you mentioned and others that we've done are all product of collector ingenuity and creativity. It's not our ideas; it's people's ideas that bring them to us. And so to have that vehicle that we can help them achieve their vision of how they want their collection. I mean, I don't need to tell you how important it is to people how they display their collection. To some people, it's one of the most important things other than family and their professional lives. And so to give people the medium by which they can accomplish certain visions, it's great. It's so much fun. Much fun.
And where do people find CAS?
These days you can find us pretty much anywhere. There's so many different places, but we got a website, collectorarchive.com, on Facebook, Collector Archive Services, Instagram, Collector Archive, and we're now actually starting out really to put content on our YouTube channel. We're going to have folks send in, actually leverage our collector customer base and have people send in 1 minute or 2 minute videos of their favorite CAS pieces, do unboxings, have interviews with our collectors, our collector customers, and just have a lot of fun and add some educational value to it. So you can find that on Collector Archive Services on YouTube.
Yeah, sounds brilliant, mate. Absolutely brilliant. Now, let's go on to the way we're going to look at your collection tonight. So we tend to use a five-step rule on Generation Skywalker. Whether we're recording a round table, we choose 5 topics, blah, 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 blah. So with collections from like yourself, we've got you on to look at your collection. I asked you to choose 5 items from your collection. Now, anyone that's seen your collection, you have got some stunning pieces, some stunning displays, all sorts of stuff. So to choose 5 items is always going to be quite difficult. You've chosen a real kind of eclectic mix. It's very, very different as we try to curate your collection through these 5 items. And the first item you sent me was a Han Solo, small head Han, on a Kenner card back. What's the story behind this? Why have you chosen this as one of your 5?
Yeah, so that's, as I said, I'm a Han Solo focused collector, first and foremost, and so that ticks that box. I collect. I started out with my collecting, just collecting Han Solo original on any card for non-US, US, and kind of branched out, and I think I'll start collecting the other Han variations as well. I got real crazy into pre-production Han Solo stuff as well. And that became, consuming to finances and time and a lot of other things. So I moved off from a lot of those pieces, but this is one of the few that remained. It's a white footer Han Solo, and so the white footer is the earliest produced 12-backs, and this is a Hong Kong variation. There's Hong Kong and Taiwan. Most folks believe that the Hong Kong white footer is actually, not only is it the earliest 12-back, it's a pre-production sample that was given to salesmen before the line came out. They would go and try to pitch the line to Toys R Us and KB and all the other places that sold toys. And this one in particular, there's a lot of people that have blazed the trail in Star Wars collecting and were dumpster diving in the late 80s, early 90s to bring to market lots of prototypes and other things from Cincinnati and Kenner otherwise, and Kenner employees throughout the country. I've never really been someone who did anything like that, although I wish I did. Those people pulled up crazy stuff for not a lot of money and turn around and have some great stuff. But this one, the niece of a Kenner salesman had posted this on eBay along with a white footer R2, again, the same situation. And she posted that she was, as I said, the niece of a Kenner salesman, and I ended up getting both the pieces for a pretty sweet deal. Now, there's kind of mixed information in the hobby whether the white footers actually were salesman samples or not, or were actually production and just were the first 12-backs off the line and still sold at retail. And so the fact that this woman who basically didn't know what she had, I still paid a good price for them. But it kind of lend credence, because her uncle was a salesman, lend a lot of credence to the fact that they were internal pieces, sales pieces that were intended to pitch the line and not intended for production. And it's CAS graded, by the way, too. So that's also why I chose that piece as well. CAS graded that item as well. And it's funny, since I joined CAS, I'm always, I send a decent amount of my stuff if I buy at a show or what have you. I do a lot of shows and travel the country, and hopefully one of these days I'll make it to the UK. I watched some of the virtual Farthest From today, and it's a show I want to get to. I'd love to come and have CAS pay my way to get there at some point. But as I said, when I pick up a piece at a show and send it down with other customer submissions, I'm always wary if I ever sell or limelight a piece that CAS is graded, because I don't want people to ever think that there's a perceived conflict of interest, that I own the company, so it really should be an 80, but I made it an 85 or a 90 or what have you. So if anyone ever thinks that there's a bias or a conflict of interest, they should look at this piece. It's graded a CES 50, which is a pretty low grade.
Yeah, because I think you're being a bit harsh on it, actually. I haven't seen the back of it, but yeah, I can see there's probably a slight wave on the card there, isn't there?
It's in pretty rough shape. It was stored pretty poorly, and the bubble, there's a bunch of water damage on it. The bubble had opened a little bit, and there's a bunch of dirt and debris. It's just a piece of garbage carded figure, but it's such an early piece, and an item that I love having in my collection. Is a great piece for a Han Solo collector.
Is there many other Han Solo 12As around with the white footer?
So it's a great question too. At the time, there was not known that a Han Solo came on a white footer. I think at the time maybe there was 7 or 8 white footers for the first 12 that were found. None Han Solo. This was the first one that was found. I felt like a champion because I had the only one, and subsequently 2 more have been found since then. So I'm not as special anymore. I'm not as special, but you still love me, hopefully.
So this is the only Han Solo item you've picked in your 5.
Yep.
Is this the most important piece of your Han Solo run?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's the most important. As I said, I got into pre-production for all the Han Solo collectibles, for all the Han Solo variations, pretty hard, maybe in 2014 or so, and picked up a decent amount of pieces before prices got crazy. And over the last, I think about a year and a half ago, I sold pretty much all of them, just about 20 pieces. Again, someone who has several hundred, not several hundred, but a couple hundred pieces or more in my collection, I was able to sell 20 pieces for pretty high values. People pay a lot for that stuff. And so I had some pretty key pieces, but all that stuff is gone. This is one of the few pre-production pieces that remain. But whether it's the most important or not, I'm not sure. I don't necessarily play that game. What's your favorite piece? I have a lot of things I really like a lot.
What other kind of things are in your Han Solo focus? Just as a bit of an overview.
As I said, I collect primarily now production for Han original on that probably, now that I'm thinking about it, as I'm saying what I'm going to say, that probably is the most expensive piece that I've retained. I still have one or two other pre-production pieces, but mostly it's Han original on U.S. Kenner, any different card front. I don't get too crazy into card back variations for the same reason that I said when we were talking about the ceiling in my collection room. If on the back it looks almost exactly the same, or sorry, the front it looks exactly the same, I don't get too crazy about back variations. So I've completed the Kenner run, and I have a bunch of different non-US Han Solo originals as well. I have a nice little wall of that. That's basically it. I have a bunch of modern prototypes, which are great. I collect those too, and those don't break the bank. It's just the vintage pre-production stuff. The prices had gotten so high that it wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun for me that anymore. I was spending a lot of money to accumulate a collection that frankly made me nervous to have that kind of money into a collection. So selling those items kind of freed me, and I get just as much pleasure out of buying a modern prototype for $100 than I would for a vintage one for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, which again is, I'm not a rich person. That's a lot of money to spend on a collectible.
It is, yeah. You've got to be comfortable with having it. Obviously, apart from modeling yourself on him, why Han Solo?
I kind of fell into it when I first started collecting. I started collecting in 2012, again, seriously as an adult. It was in that mode, and I'm sure you can remember this, where I was just buying everything. Now, again, I wasn't one of these people that came into the hobby with a splash and was, buying $1,000 items. I was buying carded figures that were $50, $100, $200, but I was just buying everything, anyone that I could find within that range. And after a year or so, I looked at my collection and I had 4 or 5 Han Solo carded figures that, a couple of which were pretty key pieces. I liked the look of it. I liked the green. It wasn't necessarily anything about Han Solo that he was ever my favorite, or I don't desire to have a piece of Harrison Ford's hair or a lock of hair. I wasn't one of those people that was obsessive about the actor or the character. I liked the character just fine, but I also looked around at the time, and it amazed me that for the key focus collector runs that I was aware of, different collectors that collected them, no one really collected Han original. So I was like, well, this is probably going to be expensive as hell, but might as well go ahead and do it. But I always envied people that chose, Prune Face or, 9 Number, one of the later characters to focus on, because there's a much smaller universe of stuff to collect for those people. So I think I shot myself in the foot by choosing a first 12 character.
Most definitely. You don't go into all the oddball type items as well.
It's like anything else, man. If I go to a show or I'm out somewhere with to meet up or what have you, and there's a Han Solo related item that I think would look good in my collection, I buy it. But I'm not scrolling eBay or the Facebook groups all the time looking for Han Solo margarine containers or things like that. it's not necessarily my prime focus. I like the figures. I really do.
Yeah, totally. Well, that moves us on to the second item you sent me then, which is, I'm taking it this is in a CAS case again. No, it's in an AFA case.
Uh-oh. Is it an AFA piece? From the other guys? Oh, man.
Yeah, no, I just zoomed in on that. Didn't expect to see that. Is an early bird kit.
Yep.
Why does this make your 5? It's a great piece, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, AFA does a great job, and there's no animosity towards them at all. They're a wonderful company. I was a customer of theirs for a while before it became part of CES. They've done great things as well. I actually think that's why I chose that piece as well, because I figured you might ask that question. I forgot it was a couple of weeks ago that I sent you these pictures. But the early bird kit, it was one that I think I got my first one 6 or so years ago, and I remember it was a one piece. Of course, it started it all, right? I think that's the easy place you go with that. And so I remember when I got it, it was the one piece that I would stare at for, not hours. I don't mean to sound like a maniac, or I wouldn't just sit there and stare at like a lunatic, but that I would take out and look at every angle of it and really enjoy it and really appreciate the fact that, something that was so early in the line had survived, unopened. And it still amazes me that an item like that can remain as it was, and that it wasn't torn apart by a child. And it's so important to Star Wars collecting. But I eventually sold it, and I regretted it. And until the Hakes auction last fall, this one was for sale. There was a couple early bird kits that were for sale, which was strange that 3 would come up at once. But whereas I think I sold, my other one was an AFA 80. It was a transition variation, which is a rarer version, which has the Luke Skywalker in a General Mills blue bag. It has General Mills on it. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's a transition between the DT and the non-DT. And sold that one for probably 3 times what I bought this one for. It was a great deal. And it's graded a 70 by AFA. I think for the early bird kit, they grade the box, the baggies for the figure, and the figures themselves. Everything was an 85, meaning a high grade, except for the box, which was graded a 70. Now, the reason it was graded a 70 is on the back of the box, someone had written in black magic marker, Star Wars guys, right? Written Star Wars guys on it, I love that so much. I didn't care about the grade, right? I mean, again, that sounds crazy for someone who owns a grading company to say they don't care about the grade, but everything was so nice. It happened to be graded a 70 because someone wrote Star Wars guys on it, but this piece is early. It's what started it all. It just showed you that sometimes the grade isn't the most important thing, and frankly, the fact that Star Wars guy is written on it just gave it so much character, and I love the piece. Love the piece.
I totally agree with you. I think it's better because it's got that on the back of it.
Right, that's
a bit of character. Yeah, personality to it, and just there's something. Someone has kept it so tidy, but then deface the back of the box with Star Wars guys. How are you going to remember what's in the box unless you write Star Wars guys on it? Come on. yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It is an amazing piece. Do you remember the early bird? I don't know how old you are, Ross, to be honest with you, but I just wondered if you've got any recollection of it. I don't. I was born in 1978. I'm 42. Oh yeah. So this was before my time. My earliest memories of Star Wars War was right before Jedi, probably after Empire had come out. I remember buying some figures with my father. This is my very earliest memory, but the only movie that I saw in the theater was Jedi. Fascinating backstory to it. Yeah, pretty neat. Now the third item. I think you said this was a wall in your collection room, yeah? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which has got 3 large items framed on the wall. So I'll let you run with that. But first of all, is your card with the racetrack round this wall, isn't it? It's got the Star Wars logo. the Hildebrand.
Right. Yeah, that's my favorite of the three walls. Obviously, it's got the Star Wars racetrack, which, talk about iconic. It's one of the most iconic images, and it's what I think it's a big part of the reason that I remain captivated by the packaging and the toys. I just love it so much, and that's why I wanted that to be on that wall, and along with the Empire and Return of the Jedi ones, and so on that wall is just this three items, and that's part of where I think some of my collection is gone to. I've moved more towards items that I can frame. I love getting a poster or some larger item. Now, in particular, the three items that are there, they go in order from Star Wars. It's Revenge, but it's a Empire Strikes Back image, and then Return. So starting on the left side, the Star Wars one is a mock-up sticker sheet. And so what that was is, if you can see, there's a bunch of different Star Wars logos in various sizes and pieces of a racetrack. It was an internal piece at Kenner, as they were mocking up boxes or getting different designs ready to present for what the box art would look like. If they needed to cut out a Star Wars logo to put on a mock-up box or a racetrack to put on it, this was a big sticker sheet that they cut from. And there's just a few cuts in this sheet. It's not a complete sheet, but it's intact enough that it's a really interesting display piece. And then next to that is a Revenge of the Jedi Millennium Falcon proof sheet. And so it's the same image of the Millennium Falcon box that appeared when they re-released it in Empire, with a Bespin scene with the Bespin guards, and I think Lando is in that image, but obviously with the Revenge logo on it, which is great. It's a Revenge proof, which I think is pretty desirable. Vehicle proofs you don't see as often as you do the figure Revenge proofs. So I love that piece, and I picked that up very early in my collecting. Actually, that was my very first pre-production piece of anything. I paid a fraction of probably what it's worth today, which is great. And then to the right of that is a chromalin for the AT-AT in the Jedi box. And so it's non-production. The AT-AT, what's written underneath AT-AT, is different than production. I'm not looking at it directly with me right now to say how it was different than production, but I think the script of how they describe the Walker is different. And it's a chromalin, which is an earlier stage than the proof. It's printed on glossier, heavier cardstock, and that would be what they'd actually mark changes off of. That's really more of a proof than the final proof. A proof sheet really isn't a proof. That was just to see what it would look like final. The chromalin is really where they would mark changes and quote unquote proof it. And so that's my favorite wall in my collection room. There's not much there. It's just three items, but that's really my favorite place in my collection room.
That they are stunning, aren't they? They look amazing.
Thanks, man.
Is there any changes on the AT-AT?
Not on that one, no. Other than the fact that they did, as I said, under AT-AT, it says Imperial all-terrain, whatever the final the letters are, the final word there, and I think they either took off Imperial or added it in production. I can't recall which is which, but that is different than the final production. But no, there's no handwritten comments or otherwise on this one. So I'm glad no one from Kenner scribbled on my chromalin. Although it's actually cooler if they did. It is cooler if they did.
It is a beautiful wall.
Come visit.
Oh, I'd love to.
One of these days.
Yeah. I was always I'll probably hold you to that. Probably jet out with Jez or something one day. Knock on your door.
There would be nothing better. That would be a dream for me.
Staying on the kind of your proof sheets and stuff. So we're going outside of Star Wars here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, anyone who goes and watches your video of your collection room will notice that you've got a lot of Master of the Universe stuff I noticed in there, but also G.I. Joe. Obviously a huge fan. Obviously resonates with you. Obviously got memories of it. And this is another wall, which is, I think, is it all G.I. Joe?
It is. It is. Yep. Yep.
I don't know anything about G.I. Joe, so
it's all good. I chose this one, and I think it dovetails nicely into you asked when I was born, if I remember the early bird. I was born in '78, so I was certainly old enough to collect Star Wars, and I love Star Wars and had it. Now this is the first toys I played with, and I still have my childhood figures, which is great. But I really, when G.I. Joe came out in '82, and really when the line peaked in '87, '88, I was 9, 10 years old. I was, more of a boy, less of a toddler or child. And I'd say that was probably my favorite growing up, the thing I played with the most. And I chose this because I love, other than that Star Wars wall, this might be my favorite wall down in my basement. Now that's actually outside the collection room. Much to my wife's chagrin, I've taken over the whole basement with stupid pop culture things, and this is consistent with I like to frame things up, and my basement basically has just dumb frame stuff throughout. I'll have like a Garbage Pail Kids poster or a He-Man poster that I've probably spent more to frame it than the poster is worth, but things like that make me happy, and so that's one big wall. Those are proof sheets for the packaging for all of the first 20 figures of the G.I. Joe line. The one to the far left is a 9-back proof sheet. That's the first 9 figures, all the proofs, all in one sheet. So it's an incredibly special piece. I think there's 3 of those that exist. And so it just really, really, I love the card back art. As much as Star Wars collectors, we obsess over the card art when the images that appeared on the cards. Those are just pictures, right? They're great pictures of parts of the film, but the G.I. Joe card back art really was art, and it captivated folks here in the U.S. And I know you guys had Action Man, or was it Action Force that was
Action Force was the smaller ones, yeah.
It was the Action Force, and so I think a lot of those images appeared in the UK as well. Just great stuff. And I showed that because I like frame stuff, and also to show that I do collect stuff other than Star Wars, which by being part of CAS, that was a big part of it, right? But before I joined CAS, I was primarily a Star Wars collector. I branched out a little bit into other lines, but we get so many different lines in at CAS, and every time someone submits something that I haven't seen before, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta have that. Before you know it, you got a bunch of like McDonald Land figures from the 1970s in your collection, Ronald McDonald and Grimace and all the other ones. So
just out of interest, so when you compare G.I. Joe to Star Wars, how readily available is things like the prototype and the proof sheets? And I don't need you to name prices, but what about how is it comparable to prices from a Star Wars proof sheet?
Yeah, that's a big part of the attraction to me. Not only the fact that I love the line and loved it as a kid, to pick up, that if that was the 9-back proof sheet, right? That's the equivalent of having a 12-back proof sheet, which would be 10, 15 times or 10 times what I paid for the equivalent G.I. Joe 9-back proof sheet. Now that's the extreme example because 12-back proof sheet would be a highly desirable item, but some of those I have other single proof cards that are a quarter of what you'd pay in Star Wars, maybe a fifth in some cases, depending. It's hard to make an apples to apples comparison, of course, but generally speaking, 25% of what the equivalent Star Wars is, and so. If you're a pre-production collector, that's where I kind of moved. As I said, the Han Solo and Star Wars stuff that I had, it just got into crazy prices that, for someone with a wife and 3 kids, and I'm the only worker in the family, it just felt hard to keep money like that tied up. And I don't feel as bad when I buy the G.I. Joe stuff, especially when it was off the back of selling a bunch of Star Wars stuff. And so this stuff is available. It actually may be more available than Star Wars pre-production stuff. There's fewer people that collect the G.I. Joe pre-production. So if and when I want to sell, it's probably going to be much harder for me to get rid of than the Star Wars stuff is. But I currently don't have any plans, so I'm just enjoying.
Is the G.I. Joe community as big as the Star Wars community? I know obviously it's going to have a big following, but Star Wars is huge, isn't it now?
Yeah, it's not as big. I mean, it's certainly tight knit. There's some wonderful people I've met over the last several years as I've gotten into that community, but it's not nearly the size of Star Wars. And Star Wars, it just has so much content on there. And I mean, as well as I do, when you go to Celebration, it's not just the vintage toy collectors. It's the 501st and the tattoo people and the cosplay people and just people from all different walks of life and different interests related to Star Wars. So it's G.I. Joe's not a fraction of that.
No, it's very interesting. I did notice actually, and you were saying G.I. Joe was your probably main toy growing up. Mine was Masters of the Universe. I've got many happy memories, but I love the 2-pack mailers in your collection. Do they come up often over in the States?
They're hard to find. They're really hard to find. And it's interesting that I got into those. And by the way, we're going to turn you into a Masters of the Universe collector here, Stu. So yeah, the line art, if you've seen, I think on the Star Wars department store packs, the 15-pack has like a line art design on it. Have you ever seen which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
that line art, just killer. Love it. Love how that looked. And the Masters of the Universe has the same line art on the department store 2-packs, and so I've gotten really into it. They're hard to find. They don't break the bank. Some of these Star Wars department store mailers are thousands and thousands of dollars. I paid anywhere from $500 to $800, which again it's not cheap, but it's a lot more reasonable than the equivalent Star Wars. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. I think I have 8 or 9 of those so far.
Yeah, they really popped to me when I was watching a video. Yeah.
Even more reason to come visit.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get me out of the room, I don't think.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bringing it back to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Your final image is of a loose Darth Vader, which I assumed was a childhood one when you sent it to me.
It's a very understandable assumption. So, hopefully folks can see it, but if they can't, it's a dead mint Vader. The saber is perfect, but there's frosting on it, right? The frosting on the legs, like it sat in the bubble too long. When I was very early in my Star Wars collecting, I did a deal with a gentleman. One of the very earliest collectibles that I bought in person, and certainly the first 12-backs. This guy had. And often advertised. Actually, I had an advertisement on Craigslist at the time. You folks don't have Craigslist, but you probably heard of it. It's an online ad service that a lot of people sold stuff through before Facebook came and took over a lot of that. People still advertise on Craigslist, but it's gone down. But I had an advertisement at the time to buy Star Wars collectibles, and this guy contacted me and he said, "I have Death Squad Commander number." Blah, 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 blah. Stormtrooper number 89246. What he was reading was the skew on the top left, right? On the top
left. That's right, on the front of the card. Yeah.
Right. So the guy, he wasn't a collector, didn't know what was going on. Obviously, no one described Star Wars collectibles that way, but he had 5 12-backs and sent me pictures of them, and it was great. And so I went. I was, you ever? I don't know if you've done a lot of scoring in the wild, but the feeling when you're on your way, with a pile of money to go meet someone in person for something like that, it was the biggest one that I had very early on, and I was just pumped. I get there and I go and I meet this guy, and these 12-backs are pristine. He had bought them, I think, at a movie theater or something, maybe a department store or something at the time, all the way back early when the line first came out. Had them in his attic and had forgotten about them forever until he found them, saw my ad, and met me up. And it was 5 dead mint 12-backs, a Chewbacca, Death Squad Commander, Stormtrooper, I'm forgetting the other one, and a Vader, all beautiful, except for the Vader had tape all around the bubble. And so I asked the guy, I was like, "These are all dead mint. What's the story with this one?" And he said, "When I was doing research about these figures, I saw that if I had a double telescoping Darth Vader, it would be worth significantly more money. So I opened the figure to see if it was double telescoping." Right? And so I'm like, "Excuse me? What?" And so he had taped it back on the bubble. right? And obviously, had it been a D, I mean, these were all 12As too, so it could have been a DT. But had it been a DT, removing it from the card would have been the worst thing that he could have done,
Did you tell
right?
him that?
I mean, I just told him you probably could have told him what it was. You could have figured out what it was, not by opening up the card. But what's done is done. He had done it, and so these card figures had sat in his loft for up in his attic for years and years and years, and it had frosting on the leg like it sometimes does when the plastic degrades over time, and so that Vader is now and has been the loose Vader in my loose collection. I never remove the frosting from the leg as a reminder that people do really stupid things.
And like you say, it's got the backstory with it, hasn't it, with the frosting?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. Is just it was such a rush, such a great find, and such a stupid person that would do that, right? But he didn't know. Obviously, he didn't know. But it's, I'll never remove that. I hope that frosting never goes off. Obviously, people, go through a lot of methods to remove frosting from figures. It's undesirable, but the frosting is what makes that figure story.
Yeah, it's got a great backstory, isn't it? It's better than what I was expecting. And you were just telling me that was my childhood toy and my first figure. That's what I was expecting.
Right.
So, yeah, much better. Yeah, 5 brilliant items there, like Ross, and like I said, anyone really, I'm sure the majority of collectors have seen it, but go and check out that video because it is a sight to behold. You used to have obviously your displays. You haven't got them anymore, have you?
No, that's part of investing in a grading company. You gotta raise the money somehow. So I sold off
because that was an impressive run as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Those were, and it's consistent with what I was saying before. I like collecting big flat things, right? Things that are eye-catching. So those really tick the box, and I miss that collection all the time. But again, it was it's all about you can only have so much money, and I spent a lot of money to invest in CAS and be part of that. So something had to give. Yeah,
I totally get that, and it's wonderful what you've got now. Anyway, you're not exactly got a nothing.
That's part of it. That's part of it too, right? I mean, I've never been one of these people that had to. I'm not a completist. I don't need to have everything. There's a lot of pieces that have come in and out of my collection that I've enjoyed for a long time, but I don't get too attached to stuff. And I see collecting as a constant evolution of your collection, and I still have plenty of stuff. I probably have way more stuff than any person really needs, right? We don't need any of this stuff, but it brings us joy, and that's why we collect it.
That's it. That's what I'm always telling my wife. Yeah. And I think you're a lot like me. You're very you love a get together, don't you? I know you've hosted a few over there, but
yeah, actually the real big first one that I had since I moved to my home in New Jersey about 3 years ago, we had the Empire State Collector Club came. We had 40-some people that came here in the middle of January, and people didn't realize it at the time, but it was. I mean, it may not be, but it probably will be the only meetup of the year for the group, which is crazy. But it was just a few months ago now. Had we known at the time that it would be maybe the only meetup we've had all year, maybe we would have stayed up all night or made it a 2 or 3 day bender or something, right? But no, it was great, and that's again, people say it all the time. It's cliche now, but that's the best part of the hobby. It really was. It was great.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it is the friendships you make and it's those events and
people doing podcasts and talking to friends.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's it. It's just what it's about, really. Yeah, it's fantastic. What does your wife think when you got 40 odd Star Wars geeks rock up on your doorstep?
I sometimes get jealous of guys whose wives are in it with them. Will come to Celebration. My wife's not into it and doesn't do that. And frankly, I actually don't get jealous. I like the separation. She does her own thing. She's a wonderful mother to my children. And she lets me get away with more shit than. Oh, I'm sorry.
You
should not swear, maybe. Okay,
fine.
Okay. She lets me get away with a lot and kind of do my thing in the hobby, and has always been very supportive of it. And she always says it's better than me drinking and gambling or, staying out late or stuff like that. Now, little does she know that part of Star Wars collecting is drinking and staying out late. And some of it is gambling because you buy some pieces and you sell them for more or less, but we won't tell her that. We won't tell her that.
Well, Ross, it's always a pleasure to have to speak with you, and I'm missing. I loved your. Even this feels like a long time ago, but I know since it's been in isolation, the Randy Savage auction.
Great. You watched it. That's awesome. I'm glad you were there.
To be fair, I watched all of it because I was just amazed that you kept it going for the whole time, because it was not the easiest for us to do, is it?
No, I was close to death. It was. I mean, I don't know if you saw that. Well, obviously you saw the suit, but it was pleather, like a plastic leather, and I'll tell you, brother, that does not breathe well. It does not breathe well. I was sweating like a prostitute in church, man. It was not good. It was not good. It was, I did that fully intending to lose money. I don't know if you watch a lot of these guys that do auctions online, but a lot of them their starting bids on some of these things their starting bid on some of these items are higher than the eBay selling price. So they're already starting above eBay prices, right? And I feel like folks are trying to gouge them. I just wanted to have fun. Everything was $5. I $5 starting bid. I fully intended to lose money, and I actually ended up making a little money, which much to my surprise. So it was good. Maybe down the road I'll do a Hulk Hogan or something like that, or the Ultimate Warrior. We'll see.
Oh, I'd love to see Ultimate Warrior. That would bring a few smiles. Yeah. So the only thing you lost that night was a few pounds in weight, I suppose.
I could use it, so it was all good. It was all good.
Well, brilliant. Ross, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future, maybe for a good old grading debate or something. That's always a hot topic.
Yep, of course. I wish you guys the best with the show. I was very, very happy to see that you're doing it, and just another one that will be in my favorites and will bring me a lot of joy. So you guys are doing a great job so far. Keep it going.
Thank you, mate. Really do appreciate it.